Now, more of your Wake That Ass Up morning show.
This is Margaret Home, and you're waking up to Notorious in the Morning.
Yo, what up? This is Common on Notorious in the Morning. Wake your ass up.
I said that no said Chicago, I say, yo, get up out of your bed. Me from Jamaica would have say, yo, no, get up out of your bed and no love sleep too much. So I say, I don't know, so we in tune with Notorious in the morning. Tell a girl them for wake up and washing her face and just showing it.
Just like me, the Teflon Don. You keeping it real hot right now with the hottest morning show in Boston. My main dude, the Notorious VOG.
Yeah, it's your boy Sheik Luch. D-Block, and check it out right now. You're rocking with my homie, the big homie, Notorious VOG.
What up, though? This is Big Snoop Dogg, waking your ass up. And my homeboy, the Notorious, I call him the Notorious Gumball, because he got the Gumby hairstyle. And you do know that, Big Snoop Dogg, wake your ass up.
Wake your ass up. More hip-hop, more dancehall, more R&B, more urban music. Is that unapologetic urban voice. And Notorious in the Morning, 44 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock on a Friday. TGIFB. Good morning. Good Friday morning, Boston. We start off the first official weekend of fall. It's going to be warm, and then the temperature is going to fall back to traditional New England cooler temperature, which is good with me. I actually like the fall weather. You can actually wear a sweater if you want to. You can wear a fall jacket, and actually, it's kind of like why I like the fall. Summertime, you just got to wear something that's cooler or something that's less. And of course, that's the late great Prince alongside good friend Mr. Cornel West, Mr. Man. We tied. Speaking of doctors, I have the pleasure and distinct pleasure having on the Notorious in the Morning a special urban agenda on a Friday. We normally open up the phone lines to folks, and you guys kind of set the agenda. But this individual, he'll be in town tomorrow, and I thought it would be great to have a preview. Dr. Umar Johnson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Thanks for having me on the show, and good morning to Boston. Looking forward to getting back there.
Absolutely. Now, you'll be here as before we get started. You'll be at the Strand Theater tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, right?
Yes, sir. Strand Theater tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Myself and the leading black economist in America, Dr. Claude Anderson. Doors open up at 1 o'clock. Children 12 and under are free. Elders 65 and older are also free. He's going to talk about the black print economically going forward, and I'm going to talk about the black print educationally and politically going forward.
Right, and I think it's important to have these conversations, these dialogue, because you can have it in theory, and oftentimes, just like in life, and I'll just speak to when there's any concert coming up. I mean, we wait till the last minute to buy the ticket because we live paycheck to paycheck. And when issues happen, we talk about it right when it happened. But it's good to have dialogue and conversations about issues that really affect our lives and how we live our lives, our survival. So whenever we have an opportunity, and unfortunately, Dr. Johnson, in Boston, we don't have these opportunities to come out and get the benefit and knowledge of folks like yourself. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think Boston's looking forward to it.
And I'm really hoping the parents come on out because, as you know, my expertise is in education. I'm a school psychologist as well as a former school principal, a doctor of clinical psychology, and I'm going to go in really hard on educational laws and practices that parents need to know. For example, you have a right to refuse the psychological evaluations for special education. Black parents in Boston need to do a better job of refusing psychological evaluations. If you don't give permission, then we would have a much lower rate of black boys being diagnosed as retarded, learning disabled, and ADHD when they don't have these problems. So our parents play a major role in the very quickly and fast rising rates of black boys being put on these dangerous psychiatric medications.
Now, do we know, and I'm not familiar with it, do we know where Boston falls in terms of with other states in terms of that rate, those statistics?
Yes. In fact, what I've seen for most major black cities, and I would include Boston as one of those, especially since the American Revolution was birthed there, in no major city do we not have a statistical reality where black boys exceed every other student population in special ed referrals, learning disability diagnosis, and ultimately special ed placement. And we also know that black boys are 4 times as likely to be diagnosed as mentally retarded when they are not when compared to white boys, and they're 4 times less likely to be classified as mentally gifted than white children. So clearly, when we look at the way in which psychological evaluations are carried out in the schools by the school psychologists, black boys are profiled for special ed in school, just like they're profiled for crime by the police outside of school.
Oh, man. I mean, that's troubling. Now, in terms of parents, I imagine that for schools to actually perform these psychological evaluation, they literally have to send something home, and parents have to sign off on this, right?
Without question, and that's the problem. Because when you look at it, in America, we have about 2 million African-American children in special education. That means that 2 million black parents sign permission for the school to test their child. And the reason why I have such a big problem with these evaluations, although I conduct them as a psychologist myself, is that the major diagnoses, which is the learning disability, mild mental retardation, ADHD, and emotional disturbance, they cannot be objectively proven to exist. So there's no way to prove, even with testing, that this kid really has a reading disability. And what I often find is that our children have lazy disabilities. It's not that they can't learn how to read. It's not that they can't learn the algebra. They're not motivated or interested in the subject matter because they come from a home where academics is not worshipped, but materialism is worshipped.
Right. Man. Now, as you travel around, I mean, in parents, and oftentimes when these when young boys, for example, are diagnosed as having these learning disabilities, and they're often held back, and obviously there's a big problem in terms of just disciplinary amongst I think not just black boys, but I would just say African men in general. I think the expulsion rate, suspension rate amongst people of color as young as kindergarten is higher than the general public. But when this happened, does that factor in terms of parents' decision to allow schools to do these evaluations?
Yes, it does, because once a child is put in special education, believe it or not, they have more legal rights than the regular ed students. Regular ed children do not have half of the legal protection of special ed children. So, for example, if a child is diagnosed with intellectual disability, formerly called mental retardation, they cannot be suspended from school, not even a single day, unless the IEP team, which is the special ed team, come together and approve that suspension. Kids who do not have intellectual disability, the learning disability kids and the ADHD kids and the autistic kids and speech and language kids, they can be suspended a total of 10 days maximum. And then if you want to suspend them beyond 10 days, 11 days, the IEP team once again has to come together and approve those subsequent days. So the special ed kids cannot be routinely suspended as quickly or as often as the regular children. You also mentioned the word earlier, being held back. Well, guess what? Special education is grade appropriate, which means what? Once you get put in special ed, you are automatically put in your proper grade, even if you don't have the academic skill that could go with that. And once in special ed, rarely, if ever, will you be held back, which is another problem I have about special ed, because kids are socially promoted, and they can legally be socially promoted in special ed. So that's why we have such a crisis of black kids graduating without any functional academic skill, because in special ed, you can do just that.
Wow. In Boston, we have coming up in September some ballot initiative. And one of the ballot initiative is to raise the cap on charter schools. And I wanted to get, as a school psychologist, the fact that we're talking about this, and it's to raise the cap on charter schools. One of the statistics, and just in terms of disclosure, I used to be a big proponent of charter schools. And here in Massachusetts, the governor was a Republican who I supported. He's for charter schools, and a lot of folks now, and I've done a complete 380. One of the reasons, and along with that, I've come to believe that the folks who are pushing charter schools here in Massachusetts, their real goal is to defund public education, ultimately to get rid of public education. But one of the reasons that I have a problem with charter schools is because of the rate of suspension and disciplinary for minority kids that's seen with charter schools. In terms of all of the research I've seen, it's just higher amongst African Americans, and that just comes to mind when I see the term that you use, academic holocaust against black boys, and black boys in particular.
Yes,
I see
sir.
those high statistics.
Okay, charter schools were founded in 1990 by white parents in the middle of nowhere
Right.
who wanted to educate their white kids on the public dollar. But because in education we have a separation clause of church and state,
Yep.
you cannot take public funds and pay for a private education. So a compromise was reached, and that was the charter school. A school that is publicly funded, so it's public, but it actually is operated somewhat privately. And so with the charter school movement being founded for white kids to actually get a quasi-private education on public expense, it was never intended for black children to do the same. So when all these black charter schools started popping up, we started seeing extensive investigations by State Department of Education into the operations of black charter schools. And as a result of that, in 2014, we saw more black charter schools be shut down across America
Right.
than any other year since they started in 1990. And the three biggest reasons they used to shut down black-operated charter schools is, number one, not enough certified teachers. Number two, financial mismanagement. And I've seen situations as ridiculous as $100 that cannot be accounted for in a budget of several million. And the third, and probably the most prevalent reason for shutting down black charter schools, is low test scores. But here's what you need to know and what Boston needs to know. If I'm living in Boston and I'm voting on a referendum to raise the cap on charter schools, I'm voting no, because you're absolutely right. Charter schools are being used to depopulate and defund public education. Charter schools are also being used in the black community to gentrify the black community, to ethnically cleanse the African Americans out of the neighborhood and pave the way for white folks to come back.
Dr. Johnson, stop it right there. I need you, and I know we got a very low song playing in the background, but I think I need you. I just heard what you said, but I think our listeners, I need the folks in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Dorchester, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain. I need black folks. I need urban people in Boston. For a second, pay keen attention to what Dr. Johnson just said. So, Dr. Johnson, if you can repeat that again. This is important.
Certainly. Charter schools are the new face of white gentrification in the black community. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's say there's a certain section of Dorchester I want to take back for the white people. I want to get these blacks out of here. I just can't come in and tell them to move.
Right.
That will be obviously racist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply for a charter school, and I'm going to open it in Dorchester. I'm going to hire an African American to front as the face of this charter school. They're going to come into the community, tell all the black parents that we're opening up a school for your children. The black parents, being so happy with an academic alternative, will not even investigate who is really in charge of this charter school mission. So then, once the charter school opens, I'm going to hire 90% of white staff. All my teachers are going to be white, our principals are going to be white, but once again, the black parents are not even going to pay it any mind because they're so happy they have an alternative.
Right.
So now these white teachers that are hired are going to move into Dorchester. They're going to buy up all the abandoned homes. They're going to buy up the abandoned lots. They're going to take over all the businesses that are still there. And within 5 to 10 years, this neighborhood that was once all black is now predominantly white. And in doing that, they're going to raise the property value, the tax value, the tax assessment there in Dorchester, which is going to force a lot of low-income parents out, and it's either going to force a lot of working-class people out, particularly retired black folks.
Right.
And so what looked to be a black school ultimately becomes a white school, and ultimately was the strategy that was used to cleanse out the neighborhood and pave the way for white return. Charter schools are racist. They are the face of gentrification. Everywhere you see charter schools at, you see black people being moved out. Why? In order to get rid of black people, you have to get rid of the schools that serve their children. Here's the question of the day. Why don't you find charter schools in white suburbs? Why don't you find charter schools in white suburbs the way you find them in the black inner city? Why? Because there's no interest to remove white people out the suburbs, but there is an interest to remove black people out of the inner city, and charter schools are being used to do just that.
Amen. And I couldn't agree more. It's a Trojan horse, and they're selling it to our community because parents, black parents, they want to believe it, and they tell us, it's a poor man's private school. That's what they tell you.
Nonsense.
That's what they tell you.
Because here's the thing about charters. Number one, even though it's illegal for charter schools to handpick their student population,
right?
Even though law requires charter schools to have a lottery, I can tell you, I work for charter schools, okay, all across the country. They always pick their student population. Now, a certain amount of them come in through lottery, but guess what? They strategically kick out, okay, and expel the underachieving African-American students, and then they choose off their waiting list high-achieving African-American students, given the false impression that they're raising test scores and doing better than the public school. Most charter schools are not doing better than the public school, but it looks that way because they are hand-picking their student population. And you also have to keep in mind that when you depopulate the public school, because whenever the charter school opens, a public school is getting shut down. How? If my charter school is for 300 students, that means I took 300 students from the public school. That means the state is going to justify shutting that public school down because it was built for 2,000 students, and now there's only 1,500 in there. So then once you depopulate that public school, they sell it off to white developers and investors, once again raising the property value and pushing grandmom out of the ghetto on her fixed income check.
Wow. You know what? And I think I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to have this conversation, because I think a lot of folks, because they're on waiting lists and they think this is some magic pill to providing education to their kids, that they don't realize what's at stake here. And as you mentioned, the folks who are pushing this thing, and here in Massachusetts, as I pointed out, they're spending millions of dollars, and it's the same folks. They hired a company that did the whole Swift boat thing for John Kerry. So these aren't nice folks. There's a lot of money being poured into it, and again, they're leeches. They're actually playing on the fears of good parents that don't have the money to let them feel that this is a way of providing your kids with good education. Well, it's not.
It's nonsense because it's not for all children.
Right.
And that's what our parents need to understand. The charter school, even if it holds 500 students, that's only 500 students. You have tens of thousands of African-American children in Boston who won't get an opportunity to experience that education. And even the ones who get accepted, if they do not achieve the way in which the charter school wants them to achieve, they will kick them back to the public school. It happens all over the country. Charter schools like to filter out the good students and return the not-so-good students back to the public school.
Right. It happened in Ohio. It happened in a lot of places that expanded charter schools.
Without question. In fact, the NAACP, I don't know if you saw this about a week or two ago, they just demanded a national moratorium on charter schools.
Yep.
Just last week or the week before. They're finally seeing that this is not an opportunity for black children. It is a Trojan horse. It is a way to defund, depopulate public education, and only provide academically elite children an opportunity to learn. But what about the rest of our kids? What about when all the public schools in Boston are shut down because of charter schools? Where are the struggling black boys going to go? Where are the low-income children going to go? Where are the children with low test scores are going to go? Nobody wants them.
Right.
That's who we're not looking at. We're not looking at the at-risk black child. Charter schools don't want them. So where are they going to go after that?
Right.
And you have to also keep in mind, charter schools was a strategy to take black people's attention off of community control of the public school. If you remember, in the 70s and 80s, we were pushing for community control. We were not pushing for charter schools. We said we want to control the schools in our neighborhood. We want to choose the principal. We want to choose the teachers. We want to hold the school accountable. This is our school.
Right.
Well, guess what? The charter school strategy was a very effective way to get the black community confused and distracted away from community control to charter education, which has no community control at all. That charter school is owned by the state, and it is ran by its board of directors, which is usually bougie blacks or white folks who have an economic stake in moving black people out of their neighborhood.
Amen. And I couldn't have said it any better. If you're just tuning in, Notorious in the Morning, I Wake Your Ass in the Morning Show. I'm talking to Dr. Umar Johnson. It's clear that he's an authority on these issues. He's someone who's in the trenches. He's fighting for our young folks. He's well-versed in education. And let's talk about a term that you use, academic holocaust against black boys.
It's interesting you bring that up because when my book first came out, Psychoacademic Holocaust, and I will have copies there tomorrow, and every parent needs to read it because it's the only book ever written by a black school psychologist that teaches our parents how to fight back legally against special ed and ADHD. But when the book came out, people said, why you call it a Holocaust? Isn't that strong language? And I said, well, let's look at this. There's a 6-stage process in the war against black boys. First, they miseducate black boys. Number 2, they special educate black boys. Number 3, they psychiatrically medicate black boys. Number 4, they juvenile incarcerate black boys. Number 5, they psychologically frustrate black boys. And number 6, they prematurely exterminate black boys. So when you look at it, a miseducated black boy is put on the road to a life of premature extermination or mass incarceration. The miseducation of black children leads to the Holocaust that we now have in our community. The mother of all crime is miseducation, and the father of all crime is economic castration. And one thing that bothers me when I hear conversations about black male on male fratricide, nobody ties the black on black crime level to the 50% black male unemployment rate in America. Nobody ties the crime rate to the frustration of black men who have been ill prepared academically to meet the challenges of this world. Anytime a person is not prepared academically and economically to earn a decent living, especially a man whose primary responsibility is to provide, he becomes violent. He becomes rageful. He becomes stressful because he's hurting. Nothing hurts a man more than not being able to provide for your family. If we go back in American history, who was the drug dealers and the dope dealers and the gun runners and the racketeers in the early 1900s? It was the Jewish, Irish, and Italian gangsters, right there in Boston included. They broke the law, they ran the rackets, they sold the dope. But then in 1940, the United States government gave the Irish the police department, and the Italians the fire department, and the European Jews the civil service jobs in our municipal governments that they still control to this day. They did the same stuff black men are doing now. The only difference is the government intentionally gave them a foot up, an opportunity, and all black men did was go into the criminal underworld that was formerly owned and created by the Southern European immigrant.
Wow. He'll be here live tomorrow, Strand Theater. Doors 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock. Doors open up at 1 o'clock. We also going to have some vendors there, so we want everybody to come on out, support black business, support black vendors. Lord knows we give our money to every other ethnic group in America. It's time to give some back, and that's another big problem that we have because we are not economically organized. We don't have money sitting in vaults that's waiting to be used to endorse our own political candidates. We don't have money just sitting to buy up some of these public schools that the charter schools are leading to be shut down. Because if we were economically organized, guess what? Whenever they shut those public schools down, we could step in and buy them. And say, guess what? This is going to be a private, independent school for African-American children in Boston. We need a black bank in Boston. We need a black school in Boston. We need a black hospital in Boston, black supermarket, black distribution network, black transportation. Everything necessary for the community to survive, we need one of all of it. That's how you become self-sufficient, like the Chinese, self-sufficient, like the Irish, self-sufficient, like the Arabs and the East Indians. Self-sufficiency is the order of the day. Without it, you're just a slave to society.
Wow. Well, you know what, Dr. Johnson, I'm going to have you back on Notorious in the Morning because, again, in September, it's a ballot initiative and a lot of money is being spent. I think the folks who believe, like myself, that a public education is a safety net, is the final safety net to our kids. Because if they don't have an education, like you said, it's a pipeline to the prison system. And
you also got to keep in mind that shutting down the public schools is part of the criminal agenda of the United States government.
Right.
In other words, if we're not going to hire black men, America has no interest in giving black men jobs. When you turn on CNN and see what's going on in Charlotte and other places, you don't hear any conversation about giving black men any economic opportunity. So it's clear they're not going to do it. Well, here's the thing. Public school was started to do what? Educate people so they can work in the factories. Well, guess what? There are no factories. So if education exists to provide workers to work for capitalism and there's no jobs, there's no purpose for public education. And that's why they're shutting the schools down. Keep in mind, the United States Constitution does not give our children a right to learn. The Constitution does not give you a right to an education. And because of that, who are trying to actively destroy the United States Department of Education, they want to get rid of the State Department of Education because they feel that they should not have to spend tax money to educate poor black children.
Right. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And like I said, tomorrow you'll be at Strand Theater. And again, what's the admission price? I remember you mentioned it earlier.
Yes, sir. If they get their tickets online now at princeofpanafricanism.eventbrite.com, or they can just go to eventbrite.com, type in Boston. I'm sure the event will pop up if they type in Boston at eventbrite.com. It's $30 online. We will charge a little bit more at the door, and a significant portion of those proceeds will pay for the second annual Dr. Umar Johnson Black College and Consciousness Tour that I run every summer for our 11 to 17-year-old black boys and girls. And
you'll be signing copies of Academic Holocaust Against Black Boys as well? You sign copies of the book?
Yes, sir. Yes, I will. And Dr. Claude Anderson will also have his Powernomics book there, as well as Black Labor, White Wealth. So a lot of really good information that people need to read. So we're really hoping that Black Boston comes on out, bring the children are free. Bring the grandparents are free. It's an event for the entire family.
Well, that's what's up. I mean, knowledge is key. And I think oftentimes, like I said, Boston, we really don't have an opportunity enough to have these conversations before there's an issue. And, we tend to have some politicians and some folks who are in power here in Boston, and they like to say stuff like these things don't happen in Boston, and why should Boston do certain things as if we're paying for the sins of other places. And they don't realize beyond the surface all of those things happen in Boston. And not only do they happen in Boston, many of those things started in Boston. The stop and frisk in New York City, the commissioner came from Boston, so that started here in Boston, and so much more. And we can go down the list. But I think it really adds value to the knowledge of folks here, and I think young people in particular in this city are just yearning for that knowledge that they don't get, and maybe folks like myself are just not providing it. But when there's an opportunity, Dr. Johnson, to have someone like yourself in town, I certainly ask everybody to come out and listen to you, because I had an education this morning, and I appreciate what you do, my brother.
Thanks a lot, my brother. Appreciate it.
And I'm actually going to come out tomorrow and see you as well. So I look forward to talking to you again, Doctor, and have a safe trip. And we'll see you tomorrow in Boston.
Will do, my brother. Take care now.
All right. That's if you're just tuning in, that's Dr. Umar Johnson. He'll be here tomorrow live at the Strand Theater. Doors are at 3 o'clock, and you can get tickets online, and I'm sure you can get tickets at the door. For kids, it's free, and for grandparents, it's free. I mean, everybody else, come on, you got to pay a little something. And, of course, all the proceeds go to a worthy cause. And if you tune into to the benefit of that conversation, you realize it's someone who's on the right side of the right issues. He's working towards making sure that our kids, our black kids, have a successful path to succeeding in this world, that everything is stacked against them. And some folks believe that's not the case. They think it's been a nice and dandy world before Obama got elected. And one person in particular believes that, and she actually said it. And when we come back, we're going to get to it. And towards in the morning, that Wake Your Ass Up Morning Show.
More Notorious in the morning on the way.
More hip-hop.